we are live.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this very timely conversation around workplace mental health and young people dealing with COVID in 2020. There are so many challenges that we are all facing at this stage. It could be financial challenges, health-related challenges, challenges to do with parents and elder care, as well as children at home. And it's only understandable the stress and the tensions that the youth of India are facing today. We have with us a great panel of friends and mental health allies who are here to talk about their experiences, share best practices across their organizations, and also give suggestions, tips and tools really on how to navigate these uncertain times. We have unique challenges in India because this is a country with already a large volume of mental health issues that have been there. India has about a third of the world's burden of suicides, of addictions, of cases of depression. And yet in times like these, when there is excessive isolation and loneliness, it's very important to reach out and find the support. Corporate India struggles in its own ways. There is work from home issues in terms of balancing work life and priorities. People have been losing jobs and some have been working harder to retain them. And it's very important to think about all of these in the midterm and long term and recognize as employees, as people working in organizations, how can we support each other? How can we support ourselves and those around us? So with that, I would like to invite Umang, Aditya, and Amit, three great friends and big supporters of InnerHour and the work that we are doing in the mental health space, to talk about some of their learnings and best practices. Aditya, as many of you would know, is board member of Oyo Homes and Hotels and founder of the Homage Foundation. Umang Bedi, co-founder Dailyhunt and formerly managing director of Facebook India. And of course, my co-founder at InnerHour, Dr. Amit Malik, who is a psychiatrist by background and has spent over 20 years practicing psychiatry, was with the Royal College of Psychiatry and has now built InnerHour, which is a digital mental health platform. We are in collaboration with Dailyhunt here today. I would like to thank Umang Bedi and the entire Dailyhunt team for bringing this issue to the fore and really helping people understand what mental health issues are. How do we handle anxiety? How do we handle panic? How do we handle work from home stresses? And how do we find hope and inspiration in conversations like these? So with that, I would love to invite Aditya and Umang to share their reflections first, and then invite Dr. Amit Malik from InnerHour to share a lot of our learnings that we have seen and what are best practices that can support people in these turbulent times. Umang, over to you.
Aditya, do you want to go first? I'd love to hear your perspective.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Amit, Umang, and of course, Neha. While we are your friends, we are unabashedly your fans as well. So, I mean, just so cool on what Amit and you are doing. And I wanted to congratulate InnerHour and more importantly, kind of thank you for bringing this up here. You know, I was wondering whether I should use the word topical or it's really need of the hour. Actually, it's been the need of the hour for a very, very long time. And for a variety of reasons, we don't talk about it. We don't talk about it enough. Or even when we do, we talk about it in some second or a third person, it's happened to that friend and it happened to my, so-and-so. Look, I'll be honest, I've never been diagnosed with clinical depression, right? I've never been diagnosed with something where I needed a medication or I needed long-term, therapy. Having said that, our challenge is something that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, yes. I don't know for how long I've stood up on daises and including, when leading very, very large organizations. And I've said very openly that, life is tough and it's kind of almost meant to be tough. The second thing is that, I used to often get questions from a lot of my younger colleagues. And in the last, maybe 15 years of my life, I've worked a lot with my younger colleagues. And once in a while, there'll be this question, then 9 or 10 times I'll get asked this question: what inspires you? How are you always so energetic, and so on and so forth. So I have answers for that. Every once in a while, there'll be this very interesting question, or at least two very interesting questions which will creep up. One is that, you know, don't you ever feel like kind of giving up, and so on and so forth? Or the second question is that, don't you sometimes feel like, of quitting and then kind of doing something else, and so on, and so, but it'll be asked in a very diplomatic sort of way. And here's my answer. Every time, 100 out of 100. I'm like, it happens to me every day. And maybe sometimes several times a day. Like, and look, right, the reason I say this is that we all need to acknowledge that we are human beings. And at the same time, each one of us is a leader. And we are a leader of an organization, we are a leader of a team, we may be a leader of a family, we may be a leader to your spouse, you may be a leader to your child, you may be a leader to your aging parents, and so on and so forth. And leadership can be often, a lot of the times, a very lonely role. And that's more lonely because we don't talk about it. It's more lonely because we think, I have all the answers. And even if I don't have all the answers, let me not tell anybody I don't have the answers. And even if I tell anybody, I'll tell them, I'll just give me a few days and I'll fix it. Right? It's okay. It's okay. It's us. It's only you and me, So that's very important. So making it first person is extremely important. And the second bit is that, us as individuals, as siblings and children, or parents, or spouses, or us as CEOs, or whatever role we play, how can we be an ally? And here, what Amit and Neha, I'm as much ever curious, and I'm telling you honestly, I'm always trying to learn if, as much as supportive I can be, what does that really mean? Like, what can I do as an ally? If when I'm sensing something, or somebody talks to me directly, how can I help? So maybe knowing that it happens to everyone, acknowledging it, needing the help, and willing to help, I'd say that's where, my kind of mind matter, this thing kind of revolves around. I hope that, those are some of my thoughts, Amma. Over to you.
Thanks for sharing, Aditya. I think that's so true. Really owning it, speaking about it in first person, recognizing when something is wrong, having the courage to ask, and also when you don't know how to help someone, but you have the intention to help, to even build the vocabulary and a simple understanding that what is my go-to plan? How can I be of use to myself, to someone else, whoever might be in distress? I think that's a great thought. Amit, feel free to jump in and respond to that. And Umang, then take it over and do share your experiences across your former roles, your present role, and all the learnings you've seen in the course of the last few months.
Thanks, Neha. Sorry, Amit, over to you first.
I was just going to react to a couple of things that they said. I mean, it's great to hear the conversation happening in first person and not in third person, because that is where so much of the stigma sits, between the first and the third person in some ways, and so it's fantastic to see that. And really, I often get asked this question, right? Especially in the last few months. I've been asked the question, the team have been asked the question a lot as to, I'm worried about the friend, I'm worried about relative, and what should I say to them, and how can I connect with them? And the first real broad answer is just connect. Right? And so the first answer is actually there is no right or wrong way. The first thing is that making sure that the other person knows that you're there, that you're available for a conversation, that you're available, that you hear them out, that you won't judge them, you won't try and cure them of whatever the problem. I don't use cure in the clinical sense of the word. Try and solve their problem. Right? It doesn't have to be that. The first step has to be really being present in a way that feels non-judgmental, in a way that feels that somebody can really talk to you. You are available to support, and for as long as and as how much ever they need. not how much ever you want to give. That's the other thing, right? A lot of us have a tendency to jump in and solve the problem, right? And that's true in the corporate world, but that's also very true in interpersonal relationships. Our first reaction is when we care about somebody is to jump in and say, hey, let me solve this for you. That can be really helpful sometimes, but sometimes it can really feel like, hey, this is another thing I can't solve for myself. Somebody has to come in and solve it for me. So this, I just start by saying, be present, be available, be non-judgmental, and allow the other person to feel that you will help them in the way that they need, not in the way that you might want to help. And that's a good starting point, I think, for the conversation. Umang, over to you, Umang.
Thanks, Amit and Aditya, for a beautiful tee off. And to the entire InnerHour team, Neha, Amit, I echo what Aditya is saying. Just huge fans of what you guys are doing, given that it is such a pertinent topic, more than ever. It always was. I'm just going to go a little colloquial here, but we come from a world full of biases, at least in our upbringing in India. We grew up with one Doordarshan channel on TV. There were normal people, and then there were people who were sent to a Pagal Khana, right? And I remember 2 years ago when I started spending time with you guys, Neha and Amit, for me, that was the perception of what this world was, right? In terms of mental wellness. And I think, Aditya framed it well. When you think about what it is all around, it's about a state of mind. It's about being able to express yourself. And when you go deeper into the problem, and I think you guys are the best on this, the learnings that I've had from you are, this problem is so real. It's no longer far away from you. It's not like when COVID first broke out, it's happening back in some other country. This is, your 1 degree of separation or less from someone who is not feeling really good or well about himself. And I think the statistics are 1 in every 4 or 5 Indians, right, do suffer with a mental health problem. That could just be lack of sleep. It could be anything. It could be a feeling of loneliness. It could be a feeling of not feeling, good enough about oneself. It could be anxiety. It could be depression. It could take so many manifestations around that entire journey. So I think my learnings across the last few years is, we end up spending a lot of time at work. And that's kind of become a part of our identity. And over that period of time, we all have times when life gets on top of us. Sometimes that's work related, sometimes it's deadlines, sometimes it's travel, sometimes it's health, sometimes it's worry for the family, right? But I think the first step in that journey is recognizing that you're not feeling up to it, or you have the ability to deal with those ups and downs. And I think the biggest learning for me is the first person thing that Aditya spoke about, which is having the ability to acknowledge and having the ability to talk about your feelings, to really express. And talking about your feelings isn't a sign of weakness. It's part of taking charge of your well-being and doing what you can to stay healthy. It can be hard at times to talk about feelings at work, right? If you have colleagues you can talk to, or a manager or a supervisor, it can really help. But I think everyone needs their personal board of directors. For us at Dailyhunt, through this entire period of COVID, where we transitioned everyone working from home for the last quarter, I think we've done a whole bunch of things to try and recognize this as a problem, because we serve a very young workforce. The average age of the company is like 24, 25 years. Problems that we may not even think of because we're staying at home, or we have a family support system where people are taking care of food and, a whole bunch of things, but a lot of folks are alone. And so I think what we've really encouraged folks to do is we've communicated with them one-on-one, one-to-many, as many times as we can, giving each one an opportunity to open up and just speak up. I think that's the first important thing. Taking care of physical health is also really critical. It does play on your mental place of mind. I think that's something which we really encouraged employees to do. Lots of live yoga sessions, lots of virtual sessions going on. But I think the third thing has just been partnering with InnerHour. I remember when Neha and our teams got together to run the first webinar internally. We were shocked because I think our corporate Zoom license broke. We didn't realize so many people would come live onto one time. I think we had to upgrade the license. But that for me was overwhelming because it just showed that, hey, maybe we weren't even doing a good enough job by telling people they should be speaking up. They needed an avenue to just think about it. And I think over a period of time, InnerHour has been great to work with us as a partner, because not only have we been doing multiple webinars on various issues, but we've been encouraging folks then to go onto the app, take some therapy, whether it's around sleep, whether it's around anxiety, whether it's around any particular subject, in terms of how they're feeling, fatigue, tiredness, dealing with stress of parents, elderly parents at this point of time, financial stress, for which we've been holding sessions with financial experts. So I think, as Aditya said and Amit said, we've got to be there. And I think the learning here is for leaders to communicate, and in fact, over-communicate, and then present those avenues and those opportunities, because this is a time where we have to be here for that ecosystem. And that ecosystem, by the way, is not just our employees. It's our family, it's our friends, it's our stakeholders, our partners, our customers, everyone that we work with, our communities that we're a part of. It is important for us to provide that voice and provide those channels to everyone, and just be there for them as a leader.
Absolutely. Umang, thank you for sharing all of that. I think there's several great points there in terms of the idea of what is normal in this new normal that we have outside today. The idea of mental health also being something that sort of is a continuum, right? So mental health to mental illness is a spectrum. And while mental health belongs to everybody, right? Just like physical health is everybody's right, mental health is everybody's fundamental right. In fact, there's a Mental Health Care Act that the government of India has passed in 2017 that makes it a legal right for everybody to seek mental health care treatment. And it is a judiciable right. And insurance companies have been mandated to treat it at par with physical health. So if you think about it, you talked about young working population. In the age group of 15 to 29, suicide related to mental health is one of the largest causes of death. There is one student death in this country every hour. And every 3 seconds, someone attempts to take their lives, right? Now, if you think about those statistics, what would drive somebody to a point of suicide and helplessness? And how in our organizations, in our communities, in our families, we have all seen people like that. You talk about bringing it in first person. So I'd love to share a little story from my own life. I have been someone who's had a mental health journey for the last, pretty much ever since I can remember, for the last 30, 35 years of my life. In my family, we have seen within my immediate family, schizophrenia, psychosis, depression, and several mental health conditions that moved me to get to a point where I started practicing as a counselor. And today, last year, I joined Dr. Amit Malik with InnerHour, because the realization is that all of us have been through some kind of struggle or the other, whether it's domestic abuse or domestic violence, whether it is living in addiction-based homes, whether it is looking at childhood abuse, or it might be any level of anxiety and depressive conditions. All of us have been touched by mental health issues in some way or the other. And yet very few of us, actually most of us, never ever have been able to get the help that is needed. Today in my family, we're fully rehabilitated. 30 years of untreated psychosis has been dealt with, and we're an integrated family living our lives. And it's inspired me to come and share this message with you and talk about it in first person. So I think there is real hope. And I would love to look at Amit to point out how wonderful and treatable some of these conditions can be, and the care systems that are available today. And a lot of those InnerHour is looking to build out, that would really be useful for people as they go about trying to get help, and those who try to get help for others as caregivers, which is what my story was.
Yeah, I'm very impressed and amazed by your ability to share what's a very personal story. So thank you again for sharing that.
And that's really brave, Neha, and gives us all courage to be able to kind of talk about things that we always hesitate to talk about. Yeah. So awesome.
Absolutely. So I'm going to react to a couple of points amongst it, and then I'm going to answer your question. So, Umang, we've been working, we've been working with Dailyhunt now for the last few months. We've also been working with other organizations for the last couple of years, right? And employer organizations. And I often get asked this question, right? But the question is, right, look, we've been using these employee assistance program services for 10, 15 years, right? And we get very poor engagement. Now, only 1% of our employees use it, or less than 1% of our employees use the helpline. Or so what do we do, right? And and one of the things that I say, that two things that make a huge difference is A, when the leaders in the organizations openly talk about their own challenges and their willingness and ability to take help, right? And we've got amazing stats, right? Because we work with lots of organizations. There's almost sometimes a 7 to 8x difference in engagement in an organization where a leader will openly talk about their own challenges on a day-to-day basis, and then the willingness or the journey with seeking help around those challenges, where others where they don't, right? And obviously, the confounding factors, because leaders who are able to talk about those things also hire a certain kind of a workforce themselves. So, but that's one. And secondly, the ability to create safe spaces, right? The ability for leaders in the organization to create safe spaces. I'll give you a very small example, right? So we do a lot of these workshops in the pre-COVID era. We do a lot of workshops with organizations based on the data we see from our diagnostics in the organizations. Whatever we see as the real areas where we should focus on in that particular organization. And there's one particular multinational organization that's largely sales focused. We had been seeing about a 2 or 3% of the workforce engaging in these workshops, right? And across geographies, across everything. And now and we said, why don't we just take this online? Why don't we take this anonymous and allow people to engage virtually in a way that they can ask questions without being identified as who's asking questions? Our attendance went up by 8x, and our the people asking questions went up by 12x, right? So that's the kind of difference that happens, because now people tell there's a safe space, right? Suddenly now nobody's going to know that I'm asking a question about anxiety or depression. So it's both those things: the ability to talk about things openly as leaders, and then creating safe spaces. And those safe spaces could be group safe spaces or individual ones where people can go and seek help and support and therapy, right? The other thing that happened is that our realization that as a first step, people globally, not just in India, people globally are not looking to talk to somebody. And that's true for all health seeking behavior, right? When you start getting a headache, you want to just solve it yourself rather than going and speaking to a doctor. Similarly, you just want to solve this yourself first. And at least the first instance, and that's why we produced the self-care app, right? So we produced the self-care app saying that, okay, give people the option of using a scientific evidence-based tool to start helping themselves as a first step. And that's seen a lot of engagement within the young workforce across different sectors, right? So that's the other thing. Now, Neha, you were talking about the prevalence of mental illness in this country, but also around the treatability of it, right? So one of the roles I see as mental health professionals is critical for us to play is to provide hope and positivity. There's a lot of what I call nihilism around mental illness, right? The idea that अब तो कुछ नहीं हो सकता, right? अभी तो इसको mental illness का diagnosis मिल गया, तो employable भी नहीं है, तो ठीक भी नहीं होगा. But let me tell you that the recovery statistics of mental illnesses are not that different to chronic physical illnesses, right? So whether it's hypertension, whether it's diabetes, whether it's mental illness, they all have high rates of treatability, right? People with diabetes live very full and functional lives these days with treatment. Similarly, people with high blood pressure live full and functional lives, and people with hypertension, people with mental illness lead full and functional lives. So the most important thing is to share those success stories, right? I had a difficulty. I went and sought help, whether it was through therapy, whether it was through medication, or a combination of the two, and then I got better, and I am back to full functioning with my family, with my workplace, because that's what happens to most people. Yes, there is a small subsection and subsegment of people who don't fully recover, but that's true for any chronic illness, right? There are people where the diabetes is just almost impossible to treat, people where blood pressure is almost impossible to treat, and that same way, a small proportion of people, the mental illness is hard to treat because it's complex. But for most people, they get treatment and they're usually symptom free, and then they go back to full functioning lives, sometimes with treatment, just like you would when you keep taking the tablet for diabetes or hypertension. Similarly, you might continue to be on treatment, but you'll live fully functional lives after that. So that's very important to for us as professionals to talk about it, but also people who come through that journey to share that more and more openly, essentially.
So can I ask a few questions to both Neha and Amit, if that's okay?
Sure.
Please.
Yeah. Okay. So the very first thing is, Neha, if I have a problem, right, or if I have a challenge, I don't even know if it's a problem. right? If it is a challenge, if it is something that I'm beginning to deal with, and I'm not quite sure how to deal with it, I guess the first thing that happens is that, and especially growing up in India, um, we know how to go to a general physician, we know how to go to a hospital, we know how to go to an orthopedic, and so on and so forth. But there is a huge amount of taboo, internal hesitation in being able to go and see a therapist for two reasons. One, what I say and what I talk about, will I be judged and will it stay confidential? And the second is that, will people say something or come to some conclusion when they see me going to a therapist or when I acknowledge that I'm going to a therapist? So tell me, in your own personal journey, I mean, did you face this challenge and how did you kind of overcome this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Aditya, I remember in the conversation we had on We the People as well, this came up. And dealing with mental health, whether yourself or in the family, is hard because the message in everybody's mind is "Log kya kahenge," right? And I think it's a question of thinking ki, what is our image of ourselves, and how much of that, like one of you mentioned, you get a sense of identity from your school, from your peers, from your college mates, or from your workspaces, right? What will others think of me, right? It's almost like a personal failure. We have been raised to think about keeping family secrets in the family, not talking about feelings, men don't cry, or if you have a problem, just get over it. Depression is a clinical condition, and it can take you to the point of suicide, and yet it is 100% treatable. And so people don't know that and are pushed to the brink. And oftentimes people spend 4 to 6 years before they get to their first appointment. But if only they knew what to do, where to go, and the fact that these are solvable conditions, there would be a line to go and get treatment, right? India's Dailyhunt has got over 250 million people on the platform. India's got over 197 million with mental health conditions. And that's only the reported number, right? We've got 70, 80 million people who have depressive disorders. We have 20 million people with psychotic disorders. Addiction, 22% of the adult population in India has some form of addiction, whether it's alcohol, whether it's whatever. Now, if I think about my story, as a young child dealing with schizophrenia in the family, as a young child going through school, going through college, it's a fight or flight. You cope, right? I cope by running. I played hockey for the India under 19 team. I played badminton. I just ran my way through school, right? That was my coping mechanism.
Okay, you're a kind of crazy, overachieving person. Okay, talk about normal people like us.
But if you think about it, right, it's the thing is, it's very hard to accept for yourself, right? And so your first reaction is to portray normalcy, right? Is to position posture strength, right? Fit in, right? The world has created a certain mold for us. I want to be the person that my parents want to be, that my neighbor wants to see, that my sister would be proud of, right? This is our conditioning. And so the hardest thing to do is to get to a place of saying, I need to be there for me. And if I really am, I mean, today in a situation where you can't go and reach out to an external support system, if your relationship with yourself is broken, if your sense of identity is misplaced, right, it becomes very, very difficult. And that is the biggest challenge to overcome. If you get past that, that's the stigma and the denial and whatever words you want to use it. But once you drop that, the rest of the journey is actually fairly simple, right? Because you go in, you have a treatment, you get assessed, and you come out at the other end. Amit, over to you.
Dr. Malik, so there are 250 million people hopefully watching, or will get to this. Does it? So it stays confidential, and it stays, and my doctor's not going to judge me.
So I was just going to say that stigma exists at multiple levels, right? The first stigma, the first sense of stigma. So stigma is also a perception issue, right? So let me start by saying that some of the stigma is real, that people will judge, some people will judge you, but a lot of the stigma exists inside of us. And so that perception of saying I will get judged is probably sometimes a bigger worry than people judging you, because
yes.
As we're seeing out right now in this current context, a lot of people coming out and supporting others when they need help. So this one is how मेरे को लोग क्या बोलेंगे. Second issue is मैं इतना कमजोर हूँ कि मुझे ऐसा हो रहा है और मुझे कुछ करना चाहिए. And third issue really becomes around मैं इसको जाके सब बताऊंगा इस प्रोफेशनल को, इस थेरेपिस्ट को, इस डॉक्टर को, तो ये वो क्या सोचेगा मेरे बारे में. So that's the third issue, right? Now let's start with the last part, which is easiest to crack. A good professional in mental health will never judge you. They're trained to be non-judgmental, right? To have non-judgmental listening, that would be able to tell you if something in their belief system will interfere with therapy. So, for example, if there's misaligned religious beliefs or misaligned beliefs about political systems that might interfere, then they'll tell you that, right? So that's what a good, the whole training is based on the idea of being non-judgmental, and frankly, they have seen so much craziness, and we've heard so many crazy things in our journeys of being professionals, that really it just makes us more aware of the range of things people experience, people do, people have done to themselves. So everything becomes normal. There's nothing that's really becomes out of normal for us as professionals, right? So that's one. So they don't judge you, and a good professional should not judge you, right? That's the first thing. The second is that the idea of there's a big step between worrying about what people will think and about you, to getting hope to go and see somebody. Because once you've taken that first step, what we find is dramatically different. When people have taken that first step, that stigma disappears quite rapidly. It's just the first step, and encouraging somebody to take the first step, that really, really helps. Right? So once you've taken the first step and people have gone and seen somebody, they realize that actually, why did I wait so long to actually do this, right? So that's what we experience most people. The third thing is, I've been back in India for 6 years now, right? And so the idea was to say, this is a huge problem here, right? And somebody has to come and try and systematically tackle it, looking at best global practices, and how do we address this. And I always believe that one of the biggest challenges I'm going to face in this ecosystem is around stigma, right? Around how will people be concerned about access to services. And I'll tell you what, I was surprised on day one, saying that it wasn't that big a challenge, because people really saying, I need help, I don't care who finds out. A lot of people are saying that, right? So that was the first step. So I had almost overestimated the stigma problem, and over the last 6 years, that problem has become even smaller and smaller. Now, in smaller cities, there still might be a challenge, but listen, for us, traffic comes from 100 cities in this country, and the tier 2, tier 3 traffic is almost equal to metro and tier 1 traffic today, right? So
Neha, I mean, if I can sense that someone in my close circle, family, friend, colleague, is going through a challenge, right, or is not being able to deal with the situation, how can I, as an individual, help who's not a trained medical or a counseling professional? I mean, and let's leave aside what a leader CEO can do, and I mean, and I know Umang, and I've done, and I'm sure Umang will talk about it. But just as a friend or a family member, how can I help? What can I do to make things better? And how difficult is it to make things better?
I think the first thing is really to have a vocabulary around it, right? Everybody hesitates to use words that are in even the word mental health, right? We say emotional wellness, psychological issues, we say all sorts of things, but there is a problem with mental health as a word itself. And when you look at that in Hindi, how many of us know the word for schizophrenia, for psychosis, for depression, all of this, right? We know a few broad words that are often used almost derogatory. So the first thing is vocabulary, right? Let's call it out. Let's know what it is, right? Mental health is everybody's right and responsibility, right? It's about memory, it's about cognitive attention, it's about your relationships, it's about your performance, it's about resilience. Everything that we need today is about mental health as much as it is about physical health, right? It's a silent epidemic that no one is talking about. And at the same time, there are people falling by the wayside and committing suicide. And we're seeing crisis after crisis being reported in the media from across stakeholders. So, it is about a vocabulary, and it is about conversations, because sharing experiences, sharing your strengths, sharing hope is really what makes people move, right? I mean, I've done that today. Perhaps one person will get up and do that tomorrow, and that's how it goes, right? So first point is vocabulary. The second point is to normalize it, right? This is not, I mean, when we talk about diabetes, we talk about this, I'm not drinking because I used to have a drinking problem. I'm not drinking anymore because I've been to a rehab, or I've been to Alcoholics Anonymous, right? How many people talk about that as openly as they would their diabetes, right? And you would realize that often our self-stigma is much greater than the stigma outside of
So
us.
suppose I want to help, and that person is doesn't quite want to talk about it, but I still want to be, I want to make things better for my loved one, whoever, my friend, colleague, whoever. What can I do?
So I think there is, as Amit had mentioned, it's about connection. It's about being there in a non-judgmental way, right? There was a campaign about Dobara Pucho, right? It's okay to talk. There's lots of wonderful campaigns that Deepika's organization, so many other wonderful organizations are doing that are all about saying, talk to each other, right? Create buddy systems in organizations, right? Buddy up. There is mental health first aid. There are peer experts. People who have been through issues can talk to others. So what you could do is simply build the vocabulary for it, normalize it, create the context and initiate the conversation, right? क्या हो गया? क्या लग रहा है आपको? कोई problem है? There are people who hesitate to say, have you thought about harming yourself? Have you thought about suicide? Have you thought about any issues like that? People feel that this will give suicidal ideas to others. That is not the case, right? And I would look to Amit for that, and also maybe Umang across your
I want to ask
experience.
Umang a question. Can I ask
Of
Umang a
your
question?
experience of working with thousands of corporate employees.
Yeah.
You must
Actually,
have had those moments when people have come to you, Umang and Amit both, and
actually,
said,
Umang, the question I wanted to ask you was one, what Neha asked as a leader, right? That and you've led very, very successful, high performing organizations, whether it is Facebook, whether it is Dailyhunt. I mean, Adobe. We've I've known you for a very, very long time. So how did you kind of see this, and what's been your experience? But I want to ask you another tricky question, actually, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Right, and which you can answer the second as a latter part of this is that, as successful as you are, I'm sure there must have been times when you felt, I don't know, underconfident, not quite there. I don't know where my life is going. I don't know what would my neighbors think, what would my peers think, and what would my friends think, and so on and so forth. How was that personal journey for you, if you don't mind my asking?
Oh, great questions, Aditya. Thanks so much. So I think the first thing as a leader, I would say, is it's very hard. While Neha said, be there, pucho, dobara pucho, but very often people don't open up to you because of the fear of judgment, because of the fear of, would I be in this job? Would I have this role? Would I, and I'm taking this in the context of a workplace segment. Of course, in a personal journey, it's very different. What makes people comfortable is to know that you are real. And real means you have to be open enough to share your own vulnerabilities. I remember through this whole period of COVID, Viru and I, my partner and I, Viru founded Dailyhunt. I joined him as a co-founder. But we got onto meetings on Zoom with the entire company like once a week, every week for the first few weeks. And we were just talking about what's keeping us up at night, what is making us vulnerable, how are we thinking about the business. Agar aapke ghar mein problem ho, you will share that with your loved one, right? You won't hide it from your wife. You won't hide it from your child, right? Assuming your child's a little older. In the same way, why can't you talk about your problems openly? Why can't you display your own vulnerabilities openly? Why can't you have the courage to just lead by example? So I think when you do that, it encourages people to come out and talk. It encourages people to come out and share. I know employees have come to me and I've said, hey, I think I have a problem with my son, or I have a problem with, he's got a sleeping problem or a drinking problem or, an abuse problem. And I've noticed that person who, or those people who've done it have now spent so much time, Aditya, reading about the subject. They've changed their whole style of parenting. They're now their kid's best friend. I mean, there's this whole level of trust. So it's amazing to see when you open up and talk and you just share your own issues, right? How that magic could happen. I'm sure you've been through that journey yourself, and you've also been someone like me who's transformed out of the big corporate world setup. But I think for me that realization was back in 2018 or 2017 when I turned 40. And I looked at myself in the mirror, and we knew each other well then. I was 140 kilos. I didn't like the guy I saw. My identity was my title versus the person who I am, right? And I've seen, I wouldn't want to stereotype you in that journey, but I've seen.
No, I know what you mean.
You
Go
know
ahead,
what I
go
mean?
ahead.
I mean, the Aditya I knew back 8 years ago and the Aditya I know now, I mean, this is the fittest avatar of Aditya I've ever seen in my life, right?
I wasn't fishing for compliments, but
No, no. So I think the whole semblance was looking at yourself in the mirror then and saying, what if I let this all go, right? And what if I take up a new plunge? And I think for me, that was that moment. But it was a flip of a switch wherein I said, hey, I'm not enjoying what I'm doing. And so I want to do something different. And I would say that you need an ally, right? And for me, that ally has been Viru. Like, we are so close that, we can vent, yell, scream, share what we are feeling, and then joke the hell out of it with complete non-judgment, no bias. So I think having the ability in the workplace and of course in the personal world of finding that partner, finding that someone who gives you the ability to listen, and where you will not be judged is the most important thing. I think the final two things that I'll add to that is just the whole concept, and I know all of us have been through that journey, but the whole concept of balance, right? One, being able to talk about your feelings. Two, taking care of yourself, remaining active, eating well, sleeping well, right? We all know how important sleep is. Drinking sensibly, right? Keeping in touch and just reaching out and asking for that help, right? And more importantly, taking a break. Life's not about one identity of a title or a workplace or a project or a job. It's accepting who you are. It's rejoicing on what you're good for, or what you think of yourself, and caring for others, right? And just making yourself available. And I think I'm a better 2.0 version of myself than I was as a corporate junkie. I feel like that about you. Not picking on you there, but those are a couple of
and Neha as well, founder of India Art Fair,
I know,
prima donna queen, and then an InnerHour. I mean, Dr. Malik. All of us non-clinicians have given all these sermons. आप बताइए.
So I knew of Umang's story because we've talked about it before. I'm inspired by Umang's story. The lockdowns really made me hunker down and lose 10% of my body weight, based largely inspired by Umang's story. So yes, absolutely right. So I'm just going to take the conversation slightly differently and talk about a couple of things. Right. One is that question, and I'm going to give a slightly technical answer to that question as well. That I asked at the beginning was that what do you do when somebody in the family is struggling, right? And all those were very good answers and all are very good strategies. I'm going to put some more meat around it, and let's just say that first thing is that it's very, very important that today we educate ourselves with some basic common signs of mental illness. So what would it look like if somebody next to us is not mentally well? Right? We know it about physical health. We know कि किसी को चक्कर आ रहे हैं, किसी को मतलब किसी को सर दर्द हो रहा है, तो it's a sign of physical illness. What does mental illness look like, right? And what does that look like? And educating ourselves with common signs of कोई ठीक से खाना नहीं खा रहा है, कोई रात को ढंग से सोता नहीं है, किसी की परफॉर्मेंस में फर्क पड़ रहा है, वो झगड़े ज्यादा हो रहे हैं, वो इरिटेबल हो रहा है. Those common signs of educating ourselves, these are signs of something might not be wrong, something might not be right psychologically. So educating ourselves is very, very important, right? So that then we can really step in and help before somebody gets desperate enough to have to ask for it, right? Second is that check in and bring it up. As Neha said, bringing up either questions about mental health or questions about thoughts of self-harm or suicides is not going to increase the risk of anything, right? Bring it up. So once you know what you're looking for, then you can start bringing it up, right? That's the second thing. Third is, and this is very, very important, this is where we go from diagnosis to actioning as individuals. Instead of jumping in and saying, "Acha, ye karo," this first step is to ask them, "How can I help?" Right? So really, because that's where sometimes what happens, especially in the Indian context, and especially the family context as well, we really get stressed ourselves seeing one of our loved ones in distress, and you want to help. What it does is it makes the other person shut down sometimes. So it's very, very important that we go in and say, okay, how can I help, right? And then that's the third thing I was going to say. And the fourth is then if there are clear signs that their day-to-day functioning or symptoms are getting worse, then recommend professional support and then help them find professional support. right? That's the fourth thing. So just putting some stuff out, recognizing, connecting, and then offering help in the way they want it, and then helping them with more professional support and getting them there is the four sort of broad steps of what to do. I think I'm just going to connect that to the wider ecosystem challenge, right? One of the things that I came back to this country to solve for was the idea that the ecosystem is still very disparate. There's some very, very good psychiatrists and psychologists out there, but very few of them, right? And they're also concentrated in large cities sometimes, and but there's still not enough even in large cities. If you compare a Mumbai or a Delhi to a London or a New York, the numbers of mental health professionals are abysmally low, and these are the cities where you have lots of them compared to the rest of the country, right? So the idea was that how can we build the digital ecosystem as a broad-based awareness funnel to start the conversation, to help people get access to self-care, to get access to therapist support for mild to moderate conditions. But then the responsibility also then comes on us to say, what next? If somebody needs a bit more than that, what next? So that's where Neha and I have been on a journey for the last year, and we've been talking to Umang about it a lot as to how we then go from there to start linking it to physical infrastructure. But when things start getting a bit more serious, they need more intensive support. They need support on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, to get better and get rehabilitated back at home. So I think I think if I look at the challenge in the ecosystem, we talked about stigma, we talked about access, we talked about awareness to some extent, and then it's about saying how do you provide people with the availability of services that are good quality, and that's the last bit for me.
So Dr. Malik, I want to ask you something, or I'll ask it in English and Hindi, because a lot of my and Umang's young workforce, my colleagues, so the question really is कि especially the workforce, especially when you're kind of आप college से निकल रहे हैं and you've just started working, yeah, you work for a few years, etc. जैसे उमंग ने कहा कि आपकी पूरी पर्सनालिटी, आपको जैसे लोग देखते हैं, आपको जैसे लोग समझते हैं घर पे और इवन अदरवाइज एट वर्क, आपके काम से और आपके डेजिग्नेशन से वो काफी इन्फ्लुएंस होता है. और पीपल काइंड ऑफ द फर्स्ट थिंग, सो व्हाट डू यू डू, ये पहला क्वेश्चन है. मेरा तो पता नहीं, आई डोंट नो थाउजेंड्स ऑफ पीपल would have my phone number on their mobile phone as Aditya Ghosh Indigo or Aditya Ghosh Oyo, right? So so हमारी मतलब पूरी personality वहां से बन जाती है. Now in the current crisis, जो then this Corona COVID crisis, यहाँ पता नहीं है भाई, am I going to have my job or not? मैं जिम चलाता था, मेरी जिम बंद है. मैं दुकान चलाता था, मेरी दुकान ही बंद है, right? या कंपनी में पता नहीं whether I will be kind of laid off or not. तो that very जो basic जो stability है, जो मेरे लाइफ में जिस चीज को मैं that I used to hang on, जो मेरे को define करता था, वो अब हिल चुका है या हिल रहा है. How do I deal with that?
I think so. सबसे पहली बात यह है कि this is a question which can make me sound like some Gyani Baba sitting on the 41st floor of a building. But the reality is that it's very difficult out there, right? I mean, just to acknowledge the fact that for some people right now, it is very, very difficult, and not to minimize that at all, right? Having said that, the only silver lining of this is that a lot of us are in this together, right? So all of our stress comes from a comparative feeling of success or failure, right? It doesn't matter whether I make 1 rupee or 2 rupees. What matters is if I make 2 rupees and the guy next to me makes 10. That's what. So a lot of us see success and failure as comparative. कि मैं दूसरे के comparison में कैसा कर रहा हूँ. Right. So in that way, slightly mitigating the current situation. Now, Umang said something which is very, very relevant here, which is really around saying that how can you make your sense of self more than just about the job or about the family or just about. So how do you create a sense of self, right? And there are multiple facets to this. The first that you both talked about and you both sort of been working on it from this conversation has become very evident is your physical health and your routines, right? So how that nobody can, the job can't take that away, right? The job can't take away the fact कि यार मैं तो रोज सुबह उठ के आधा घंटा दौड़ता ही हूँ, तो वो तो मैं करता हूँ. That is what I am. Not just the guy who goes to office every day. I'm also the guy who gets up in the morning and runs for half an hour, 45 minutes. That's who I am, right? I'm also the guy who spends time with my family. I'm also the guy who teaches my son. I'm also the guy who will call my mother every day and talk to her, right? So when the identity goes beyond just the job or work, then temporary failures and setbacks at work become one facet of your dimension. The world, and it is definitely prevalent in Indian culture. You're absolutely correct that you're very much perceived as who you are professionally and the success of it professionally, but you don't have to fall in the trap. I know a lot of people at all levels of professional success who, uh, what I've learned in 15 years is here, it's not about which level of success here. You could be a junior level tech developer, you could be the CEO, right? The sense of self is independent of that. And I've seen it at both extremes. I've seen
And if
CEOs
I
of
may
very,
add something,
yeah.
because I get this question a lot. I want to remind everyone listening in, and especially our younger colleagues, or for that matter, even our senior colleagues. That every mountain now, when we are climbing it, जब हम दौड़ते हैं, every step looks very difficult. लगता है कि पता नहीं, I'll fall off this mountain. लगता है कि I will never finish this marathon. I'm going to stop dead now. And somehow we make it through. And we will make it through this crisis also. मतलब दुनिया कहीं गायब नहीं हो रही. The jobs are not going away. लोगों को न्यूज़पेपर भी पढ़ना है. Sorry, न्यूज़पेपर नहीं पढ़ना है. हम लोगों को डेली हंट देखना है.
Aditya, but that's a great note, and I want to pull in Umang here as he took one step after the other to get to
Yes.
Everest Base Camp. Umang, share with us something of your journey. Share with us what almost broke you, and share with us what kept you going.
No, so I think there's a larger point than the Everest journey, but I think the point that Aditya was making around the sense of security during this time, Neha, I just want to address that because it's a very big issue. People are wondering, meri naukri, mera paisa, mera job, whatever. And I think that relative scale, if you just look at what's happening with migrant workers, there should be a feeling of gratefulness for what we have.
Yes.
हम क्या खा रहे हैं? वही दो रोटी खा रहे हैं, वही दाल खा रहे हैं, right? You're not getting if you're a non-veg eater, where are the exotic meats coming to your house? It's not available. If you are you're eating your normal dal sabzi roti, you aren't traveling. आपकी गाड़ी में petrol नहीं जा रहा. Your expenses are down to a fraction of what they were. And if there is an impact in any form, right? Just think about the relative impact to someone else who doesn't have a roof, who's struggling to get home. So I think there's a big deal around gratefulness in this time and the ability that we should be stretching out. I mean, I know so many people within society who are doing way more than any one of us, right? And I think that is one thing I want to share. And I think from a fitness journey perspective, I would just share that, I mean, specific to the Everest camp example, that whole concept of adaptability, ye 2020 match nahi hai, right? This is almost like a test match. Ye marathon hai, right? It's not 100 meters dash. And I remember abusing that up on the trek where I was leading. I wanted to walk alone. I love walking alone up on the trek. And I think I got caught in a storm. And my buddy, Viru, he was like the group confidant, carrying everyone with him, chatting, ensuring everyone comes through. I'd gone somewhere far ahead, and I had an acute mountain sickness issue, which resulted in, it was bad. And how Viru completely switched roles. It's like he was leading from the front. I had like 20 things around me taking care of me. So that ability for us to switch roles, to lead and to follow, to listen and provide that support, and just look at the ecosystem and be grateful. I think there was a couple of points I wanted to highlight.
Yeah. And I
just
want to add some, sorry,
Yeah.
I just want to add something that Umang said, and this I say it often. Because there is, at least in my perspective, there are no good times or bad times. People say, mera samay bahut bura chal raha hai. I always say that, there are so many things that happened in life which are far more than I had ever expected growing up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. When there are 9 things, 10 things that happen much more than better. When I was starting off, I thought कि मेरा एक Maruti 800 हो जाए ना, my life is set. Right? I'm telling you, that was my measure of success. But or usme, if there are a few troubles which take longer to solve, or which are more than what I had originally anticipated, and the outcome is different, right? That is life.
Yeah, I want to just bring attention to the women in the room. I'm very aware of the level of responsibility, recognized and unrecognized, that women shoulder. I'm a mother of a 7-year-old. I'm a daughter. I'm a co-founder with Dr. Amit Malik here. And there are so many of us wearing multiple hats. InnerHour is 70% of the people on the InnerHour platform are women today. Some taking the lead, some getting left behind. And I think it's very important to recognize, one is a sense of gratitude and appreciation for all the different roles that we're playing and the juggling that we're doing. मतलब सबके लिए सब कुछ सारे time तो हो नहीं सकता without something giving somewhere, right? So I think it's also about seeing what we are taking for granted, what we can do better. And most times, women take themselves for granted, right? I've done that many times, as have many women I know who are juggling many roles. And I think it's very important to recognize that self-care, self-help, asserting your needs, asserting your boundaries, right? Whether it's between work and personal life, whether it is between the needs of a spouse or the needs of a father or an ailing family member or your child and yourself, right? Umang talked about physical fitness. Some people look at meditation, but whatever it is that you could do to preserve and nurture your inner self, this is really the time for that. The amount of time and energy we all invest in looking outside and caring for the world outside of us, if we can give a fraction of that attention to ourselves, then we would be doing a service to ourselves. और अगर हम ठीक हैं तो हमारे आसपास जो होगा वो भी ठीक रहेंगे, फिर आगे और भी बढ़ सकते हैं, फिर चाहे जितनी मुश्किलें आए उसको हैंडल कर पाएंगे क्योंकि हम ठीक हैं. तो वो एक जो शुरुआत है, स्टार्टिंग पॉइंट क्या है, that is ourselves. And especially for women in households, whether we are running organizations or our homes, it's all the same, So that place of an anchor that women and many men also play in families and ecosystems is very important, because they tend to look only for others and not for themselves.
Yeah,
so I just wanted to bring that point.
I wanted to add to that point. I met this fascinating girl, two fascinating girls in my life who have inspired me. One was an air hostess at Indigo. I sent an email to Aditya when he was way back there because I learned so much from her. And the other was this 11th standard kid called Ananya Gupta. Ananya has actually built a software that, with using AI and ML, that proves the gender bias that we've put into society in our textbooks, right? A nurse is always a girl. Someone in the kitchen is always a woman. Gender stuff around, we say na ladkiyon ki tarah mat raho, right? So she's done this whole bunch of work around how these biases need to be broken. I think a lot of this is mental manat ki pagal is a bias, right? Not wanting to talk about it is a bias. If when I asked this lady in Indigo, I was sitting on the first row, and it was a Delhi Bangalore flight, and I asked her, why do you say is flight ke karamchari Hindi, Angrezi, Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, Marathi or Bengali bol sakte hain? So the way she looked at me, she said, sir, the question is a bias. And I said, what do you mean by that? She said, you think just because you speak English, either you're superior. So I said, I didn't know where this was going. This is a 20-year-old kid. So she said, think of Bharat as the United States of Europe. Every country is a different state, is a different religion, is a different culture, is a different language. The only thing binds us is a euro or a rupee, right? But it was fascinating where she was telling me that in-flight sales, 60-70% happen in a local language, because when you know that someone's comfortable, right? So again, there was a bias. So we have so many biases because of our upbringing or the external stimuli. I think the ability to just step back, be non-judgmental, and just reflect on all these opportunities. I think whether what Ananya was doing or whether what I learned from this wonderful woman who was on the plane, we shouldn't form biases around anything, and we should be there to support the ecosystem. I just wanted to add those two examples when it came to women, because there's just that gender stereotype bias that we all have as well.
I think I want to just connect the 3 points all three of you made now. And I think we just want to say, going back to that question that Aditya was asking about people worrying about their livelihood and how that impacts them right now, right? And it impacts women and impacts everybody, right? So just going back and saying that one of the things that we've been talking to people a lot about is saying that, who are they? that this is a great time to just step back and also look at who you are actually, and what are the different parts that make you. Whether it's, as I was saying in the beginning, whether it's your work is just one part of what makes you, and actually listing down what makes you in two ways, right? One is around all the aspects of कि आपका your relationships, your spirituality, your physical health, your self growth and learning for yourself, your self care, all of these things are what make you, right? That's one way of looking at it. And second thing is, how do you Umang, I think Umang mentioned gratefulness, and I think Aditya were talking about gratitude as well. The clinical benefits of gratitude are very obvious. अब हमें साइंस में पता है कि being grateful मतलब तब अपने आप ये मानना कि आई एम लकी, आई एम ग्रेटफुल, and thanking yourself and thanking your ecosystem for things you have rather than complaining about what you don't have is actually good for your mental health, your physical health, and the health of your ecosystem. So now we know that अगर आप रोज रात को 10 मिनट लगा के एक डायरी में लिखोगे कि आज ऐसी क्या 3 चीजें हुई जो अच्छी थी मेरे लिए, forget all the things that went wrong, right? Even if the dal tasted well, as Umang said, then writing that down as one of the 3 good things that happened today, right? That will actually improve your mental health. It will actually make you think more about yourself as a person rather than a narrow tunnel vision of just the job, right? And it will actually improve the mental health of your ecosystem also. What that means is you will be nicer to your family, your ecosystem, your colleagues, right? So the gratitude and very objectively talking about that gratitude is very, very important. So 2 things I've just said: one, what are the different parts that make you, and then expressing gratitude for things that are happening in your life are very, very important. Whilst the job part might be moving around a lot in this current ecosystem.
Amit, the acid test to that is actually a question I have for Aditya, and I can predict the answer, but I just want to hear it from him. So Aditya, if you just think about gratitude, right? We've all been through the journey. You've been through an amazing journey of growth, running the most successful airline and then transitioning over to one of the largest startups in the country. Tell me, were you, in terms of happiness quotient, and I know what all you're doing now, you've been sharing around the impact work that you have been driving with the foundations that you're a part of and you're leading and starting off. What gives you most happiness? The great quarter at Indigo, or the ability to create impact that's far beyond that? And if I had to judge your gratitude factor or your happiness quotient, where are you then versus now?
Umang, I would just want to chime in, so that's a leading question. You can only answer that one way.
But look, absolutely. I mean, it's almost like, somebody asked me literally a couple of days back, your youngster asked me, what's your dream? And because that's a question I ask everybody. And I said, I don't know about dream, but I just want to impact as many lives as possible for the better, right? And that gives me this, I know there's a sense of maybe vanity in it. I don't know, there's a sense of ego in it. I don't know what it is, but it just gives me the most amount of satisfaction. It's what gives me that adrenaline rush, so to speak. And even when I was running these large organizations and these many organizations that I've been involved in, I kind of found them as tools where I could learn something new every day from the people around me. But most importantly, we all, as I often call it, we have the power to make a change. And we were making a change, and we all have the ability to make a change in somebody else's life, in the life of your loved ones, in the life of your family, friends, or even for your own life. And of course, the communities that you serve in, whether you're in a hotel or whether you're in a retail business or whether you're in a hospitality business or whatever. But there is one thing that I'd definitely like to say, and that's another question that I often get asked. People call us successful, I truly think that true success is not, how many cars you have or what's your job designation, or for that matter, how many, watches you buy or sunglasses you wear. But it's like, if 20 years from now, if people look at you and they want to be like you, or I think that is true success. And I'm ever grateful. And I've said this, I don't know, maybe millions of times, so that it doesn't sound like I'm just saying it because it's sounding cool right now. But I'm ever grateful to the thousands of people who made me look good. and that's what makes this so interesting. And among that's the sort of answer straight from the heart.
That's a wonderful point, Aditya. I think a sense of purpose, a sense of impact, a sense of belonging that comes from giving of yourself, right? Ye jo time hai, we look at the situation outside our homes, we look at people suffering and struggling. People inherently want to help. People want to be good, want to do good. And when you're driven by a sense of purpose or a sense of impact, then no matter what the challenges, I mean, today we can see a salute to all the sort of COVID warriors out there, whether they are the healthcare workers, frontline agencies, people working with migrant laborers, all of us in our own way are saluting them, not just with our gratitude, but also saying, yes, we are grateful, but now we are so inspired that we want to do something. हम भी कुछ करें, right? आपके पास 50 रुपए हैं तो आप 10 रुपए दे रहे हो किसी को, आपके पास कुछ चीजें हैं जो आप शेयर कर रहे हो, whatever you might be doing, right? But हर जना आज की डेट में, I mean, this is the young India, this is the attitude and approach of this country, right? When you talk about mental health, when you talk about doing sense of social responsibility, I think everybody is driven by purpose. Many stereotypes about people's sense of identity couched in all these things are all really out of the window. We've all been leveled, right? We're in a world today where it doesn't matter how many cars we have because they're all parked outside.
You're not using them.
You're not using them, right? We're using the same set of 4 clothes, right? Because they're comfortable and we can work from home. We may dress up for a Zoom call every now and then, but life is pretty simple.
And
right?
you're cooking your own food.
But that purpose that Aditya talked about, right? At InnerHour, when we recognized what we could do in this crisis with the digital platform we had, we converted all our digital offerings pro bono. We reached out to frontline agencies, we reached out to healthcare organizations and said all the services that we have, including corporates, to say your employees are struggling, they don't have the sense of connection, they don't have the sense of community and camaraderie. Let us make these tools available, right? We had 10 to 12,000 people on the platform every day, whether they are coming for sleep issues or anxiety issues or whatever it might be from across the country. As Amit mentioned, over 100 cities. But whatever little we could do with the platform we have today, we are doing. Similarly, corporate India, there are so many examples of organizations, big or small, coming forward and saying, I belong to this community, I want to play a part in it, right? So on that note, and on the note of talking about gender stereotypes, I would love to throw one last question to the 3 men in the forum. As a female founder representing, this is now my 4th startup, representing women entrepreneurs and mothers. What are the commitments that the 3 of you will go making today to yourselves and all the women in your lives and all the people who are dealing with some kind of mental health issues, whether they talk about it or not?
Amit.
I'm not going first for sure.
Aditya, I know you're dealing with a lot of this with the Homage Foundation. You're doing so many things that are mission driven. And I know mental health is an important pillar for the Homage Foundation as well. Would love for you to kick off, but do make commitments for all 3. As they're all different, but they're all very important.
And just repeat the questions to me again. So one is what commitments I'm making to myself.
Commitments you're making to yourself, to the women in your life who are holding many, many roles, and to mental health and those who are dealing with mental health issues.
Yeah, and you asked this to the 3 men on the eve of Father's Day, right? I mean,
that's right, and just on the back of Men's Health Week.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, the very first thing is, Neha, the commitment that I want to make to myself is that, that the bit that I started off with, and I think I've kicked it off, that I want to talk about these challenges, these issues in first person, right? That's I think extremely important, and I don't want to be. I may be a hero to somebody else, but I don't want to be a hero to myself, in some ways, if you don't know what I mean. The second is that on the commitment towards mental well-being, mental health, I think this needs to become a part. I've committed it to myself that I want to just learn more about it, and I don't want to rely just on a newspaper story or a tweet or a little anecdote, but I really want to, just like if, like you said, and if I or my father was suffering from diabetes, and I would want to find out something about it seriously, and I want to spend the time on it, and I, that's the second thing, just to make myself more knowledgeable, so to speak. The third, the commitment to the women in my life, I think I think the biggest commitment is not to kind of be, not to be, not to fall into the instinct of always trying to provide the answers. I think a lot of the time the women are strong, and they're great. They're people who will be able to find the answers by themselves. You just need to be around. And listen, I have a tendency, or I've always had the tendency of trying to jump in and help. I think I like Amit Dr. Malik was saying, I should ask, like, what can I do? How can I help? And if they tell me to go sit in a corner, I should be happy doing that.
Umang, over to you.
Okay, 3 points on commitment to myself. I just continue to try and stay as positive as ever and help as many people as you can and touch as many lives, right? Whether it's through content on the platform or one-on-one help to companies, communities, startups. It gives me the most amount of pleasure, and I end up spending a fair degree of my time trying to do that, or at least wanting to do that. And I just want to commit to always, doing more and more of that and staying positive, and thriving through this, because I think there's no other way to get through it. The commitment to the women, I think I am who I am because of the women in my life, starting from my mom to my wife and daughter. And I think my only commitment there would be to be more of a active listener and not jump to solutions. And I'm picking off Aditya's because I think it's a great one. While we are there a lot more, we tend to solution or get into solutioning and offering inputs when all they need is a voice to be heard. Again, in a non-judgmental, solution-led manner. I think my commitment to mental health would be just to go about talking about it and spreading that awareness that it's okay to come out and talk. It's okay to share. It's absolutely okay. And it's also important to share with others such that they don't judge people who are going out and sharing, right? So I think those are my 3 points.
Great. Final words, Dr. Malik.
First of all, people just start calling me Amit. Yeah, it's getting scary. But
I'm wondering who they were talking about when they kept calling you Dr. Malik.
So was I in the middle. So the first one is, see, commitment to myself. And as doctors, as healthcare professionals, we're terrible at following their advice to give other people. So it's become very apparent to me about myself in the last 3-4 months that so my commitment to myself is to both physically and mentally, from a health perspective, practice as I preach, right? And try and stay healthy physically, mentally, in when using the same strategies I offer to other people, right? So that's my commitment to myself. Right, my commitment to women, and it's been my journey with women has been fascinating for both reasons, right? So I worked in a sector that's predominantly women. I worked in a sector that's predominantly used by women. And so it's always been from, as I said, from family to professors to trainers to teachers to patients. A lot of my journey has been around women, and so my commitment to women is that I will always continue to treat everybody in the same manner, regardless of gender or any other sort of demographic differences, right? So that's my commitment to women, and at an organization level, at individual level, I'll continue to do that. That's the second thing. And my commitment to mental health is this is a tricky one, because in some ways I would like to say to continue to keep on doing what we've set out to do and not give up, right? And that means to build out through InnerHour a platform that gives people access to high quality mental health support, both at an early stage, but also for severe end of the spectrum, right? That's one. And then secondly, to help at least influence development of a vocabulary, right, around mental health in this country. So what is really missing today is a language that allows for a positive conversation around mental health to happen. So really to help develop that vocabulary with Neha and with InnerHour and with other partners, so that people can have positive conversations on mental health is my commitment, besides building out InnerHour.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I think for me, if I was to look at what I would commit to myself, to mental health and to women, it's really to try and strive in the course of my life to be the best version of myself. I feel like a lot of the challenges that I've been through in life have shaped me for who I am today, have given me the strength, the vocabulary, the resilience that is coming in handy in today's times. And I think that you're absolutely right. Men and women stand equal, and the ability to ask is what brings out the strength. So to ask and to reach out is the stronger thing to do. And I hope that you all enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, and look forward to talking about mental health because my mind matters. I think at InnerHour, we're very committed to creating more and more such conversations to address different audiences and come up with a whole series around demystifying mental health, so that सबको लगे कि जो भी मुझे है वो सबको भी, किसी को भी हो सकता है. इसमें कोई शर्म की बात नहीं है, ये नॉर्मल है और मैं ठीक हो सकता हूँ अगर मैं इसके बारे में कुछ करूँगा. हम सब ये मैसेज लेके एक दूसरे को देखेंगे तो आगे कुछ कर पाएंगे. Thank you very much. Thank you everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks everybody.